Every time we fall into the trap of sparking controversy in this way, we don't do the French any favours.
There's a French phobia, an obsession regarding the headscarf.
A woman wearing a headscarf isn't a terrorist. She's a woman like any other.
And welcome to a new edition. I'm Nadia Shabi, and this week we're putting the focus on a recurrent and touchy issue that has again made headlines here in France, that of the Muslim headscarf. The debate came back to the forefront as the result of footage filmed by far-right activists during a regional council meeting and spread online. In it, a far-right official voices angry and repeated opposition to the presence in the audience of a woman wearing a headscarf. The woman in question was chaperoning her son's school trip, and the chaos that ensued sparked a heated debate on Islamophobia, women's rights, sectarianism, inclusivity, and the rule of law. Well, let's start by hearing from some Muslim women reacting to this latest uproar as they visit the Senate, where a new law is currently under review.
It's an exciting day out for these pupils and their parents. The group comes from Marseille. They're from a working-class area in the north of the city. Samia Ghali, the socialist lawmaker from the Bouches-du-Rhône region, has invited them to Paris to visit the Senate. All of them have been stunned by the polemic over the headscarf.
I was born here, I grew up here. I respect everyone. I've never had any problems. I wear it because it's my choice.
Often people say that women who wear it are submissive. That has to stop.
By a coincidence, the group were visiting just as senators were examining a law which would ban the wearing of religious items, including the headscarf, on school outings. These women regularly face stigma and even hostility because of their headscarves. And today, they want to say their part.
A woman who wears the headscarf isn't a terrorist. They're just women like any other. Everyone needs to understand that and respect our choice.
It's my religion, that's all. I don't understand why people are taking it out on us. It's harassment.
During their visit, the women had to watch the debates from a screen. They weren't allowed to enter the chamber while wearing their headscarves.
Now, it's by no means the first time that France has struggled with the highly politicized question of whether this Muslim garment is compatible with the country's brand of Republican secularism that finds its roots in the separation of church and state back in 1905. Let's take a look now at how this debate has evolved over the decades.
Leila, Fatima, Samira, 3 girls who refused to remove their headscarves in class. It was October 1989, and their expulsion from school became known as the headscarf affair.
Comme une mesure discriminatoire à leur encontre. Réaffirmer la laïcité de l'école.
Hours of debate in the National Assembly followed as the press took up the story. Soon, 2 organizations joined in.
It's by going to school, where they will acquire a critical spirit through knowledge, learning, confrontation with other young people, that they will have a chance to empower themselves.
The debate on secularism is not new. It started at the beginning of the 20th century when France passed a law in 1905 on the separation of church and state. Even then, tensions over the topic ran high. A century later, Jacques Chirac asked the Stasi Commission to consider how to apply the principles of secularism. The result, the headscarf, the kippah, and large crosses are banned from all public schools. The law is passed on March 15, 2004.
The aim is to guarantee everyone's freedom, with the only limit being the respect of common rules, and also to guarantee equal opportunities for all French people, regardless of their origin, religion, or gender.
But instead of settling the matter, the debate over the headscarf raged on. In 2008, private nursery school Baby Lou fired an employee for serious misconduct after she refused to remove her headscarf at work. 4 years later, mothers wearing headscarves on school trips found themselves at odds with government guidelines published by the education minister.
From the moment we are on school time and school trips, we need to uphold the neutrality of public service. There can be no picking and choosing when it comes to secularism.
Other Islamic outfits have come under scrutiny. In 2010, a law was passed banning the wearing of a full face veil out in public. 6 years later, it's the burkini that's banned on some French beaches and then in municipal pools. In February 2019, a French sports store advertised a hijab designed for running. But in the face of public outrage, the product was quickly pulled from the shelves.
For some analysis of France's response to this issue, I went to meet historian and anthropologist Nicole Pellegrin, who's written a book on the history of headscarves. Nicole, hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being with us. When did the headscarf become more than just a garment?
I think
that we need to put ourselves within the French context, and exclusively the French context, which is a somewhat unusual case, even within Europe.
I
think that this question has only become so controversial from around the 1990s, the year 2000. From the moment the headscarf was worn by young women or little girls, as was the case in Creil in 1989, it began to bother the French, and specifically the French, because their past is both colonial and Christian, which can explain, and I say can explain, the fact that they've made such an issue out of what is only a piece of material, a scarf.
The word used to describe this piece of material has changed as well. Is that significant?
From my point of view, it's significant that we started with the word scarf. I've worn scarves. My mother and my grandmother wore scarves. Then we put the adjective Islamic beside it. Then we started using the word veil in the singular. Then Muslim veil. And today, the hijab. It shows an interesting and negative evolution of the French mindset, which is interesting to explain. You notice also that in English, these words don't have exactly the same meaning, and the French meanings are interesting to analyze.
Is it surprising that the notion of wearing a headscarf sparks such a knee-jerk reaction here in France when, until the 1960s perhaps, women were expected to hide their hair and wear something on their heads?
Obviously, any respectable woman, my grandmother, would never go out with her head bare. She needed to wear a scarf, or a mantilla, as she would say. Respectability for women in many civilizations meant wearing something on their heads.
Including here in France.
And of course, in France, it was the same.
The laws that are debated here in France every time the issue comes up officially as the wider issue of religious symbols. But there's never a controversy over Catholic crosses on women's necklaces, or the kippah for men, for Jewish men, or Jewish Orthodox attire. Why is that?
It's even more interesting that among what the French call conspicuous signs, you forget, and it's interesting because we all do, the fact that veiled men exist in the Middle East, and that we meet quite a few of them in France. So there's something very interesting in that the focus is on women's body hair and whether it should be hidden or displayed.
Why is this issue of secularism and the way of using secularism as part of this debate on the headscarf so entrenched here in France?
I think that it's because in France we belong to a democratic, republican society that decided from 1905 to legislate on public spaces, and their openness and tolerance towards the way all men and women express themselves. Nowhere else has there been such clear-cut legislation. The problem is that today, instead of benefiting from this legislation, we interpret it in an extremely narrow way, which sets France apart from other European nations in that regard.
Nicole Pellegrin, thank you very much for having spoken to us.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Now, as we've just seen, this debate over the headscarf has been widely used as political fodder. Let's take a look now at where the different parties stand in this debate.
It's a topic that's divided the French political class for over 30 years. But for some members of Emmanuel Macron's France on the Move party, the headscarf debate is simply outdated.
Every time the issue comes up, we fall into the trap of a controversy that once again was sparked by a lawmaker of the far-right National Rally. It's not our style of politics. Every time we act like this, firstly, we're doing wrong, and secondly, we're wronging French citizens.
But the opposition, particularly on the right, seem keen to keep the subject in the public eye.
It's not a question of how long the piece of material is, but it's a question of equality, brotherhood and freedom. It's still a symbol of oppression, a symbol of submission. There are women who were sent to prison because they wanted to feel the wind in their hair.
On the far right, the headscarf is a pressing issue. This National Rally politician argues the garment simply has no place in France's secular society.
We can't fight Islamism through politics alone. We'll fight it as a country. France has a national identity that the headscarf should not be a part of.
Meanwhile, the country's left-wing parties are denouncing a climate of racism and Islamophobia.
To put it simply, a religion is being targeted. I think our fellow Muslim citizens deserve more than to be stigmatized.
For his part, President Emmanuel Macron has said he respects a woman's decision to wear the headscarf, but is not personally happy about it. The topic remains highly decisive in France, and for many, the tone of the debate has become alarming.
Well, with that, we leave this edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.